So we are on the subject of reincarnation, okay, discussing how the soul outlasts the body. Now, we kind of jumped into it yesterday in a major way, including all kinds of crazy Hasidic stories and stuff like that. But today, what we're going to do is back up a little and just discuss the soul in general to find out, how do we know we even have a soul? How do you know you have a soul? You know, some people, they're not even convinced they have a soul to begin with. They think soul's like part of a belief system, like, oh, you know, if I believe in Judaism, maybe I'd believe I had a soul. Like it's, you know, it's like there's belief in God, there's belief in a soul. So it's kind of, in a way, the soul is a belief system. So I'd like to establish just the very subject of having a soul. So how do we know we have a soul? Well, first of all, just a couple things. I'll give you a couple levels of this. Number one is when people die, when they get flatlined and their heartbeat stops, their brainwaves stop, and they're brain dead. And then those people get brought back to the hospital table. They seem to have conscious stories about their experience after death. Okay, so you can nail that down to that there's something that they call the, what's the name of that thing that excretes? It's the thing that MDMA touches.
Pineal gland.
Yeah, the pineal gland, yeah, the pineal gland. You want to say the pineal gland did something and you hallucinated, so then it wouldn't make any sense why people are able to recall things that were said inside the hospital room, even inside the waiting room, even a baby in neonatal intensive care unit is screaming and crying, and the guy comes back, when they get him back to life on a hospital table, he says, oh, by the way, there's a baby in neonatal care with a broken rib. You know, he's doing x-ray in the neonatal care, meanwhile in surgery on a hospital table. They all tell stories. They all seem to see themselves from above, meaning you go above. You want to call it your soul? You can call it your soul, but as you're going to start hearing, I'm not going to be calling it your soul, I'm going to be calling it you. And that's the whole problem. The reason you're not sure you have a soul is because it's actually you. And so, since you are you, it's like a fish trying to discover he's in water. It's a little hard for a fish to realize that he's in water because his whole existence is water. So too, your whole existence is you. So you're looking around for the water, which is the soul, when in fact you are the soul. And we'll get into that a little better later. Okay, so that's the first thing, is that the soul has, the stories of the soul that people tell where they're able to be outer body during death, where there should be absolutely no conscious ability at all with brain death. They should not be able to tell these stories, yet they all have these stories. Okay, everyone who dies and comes back to life has these stories. And you can Google this, near death, they're called near-death experiences, or NDEers they call them in the studies of it. And the most famous man who went around the world documenting near-death experience testimony was a man by the name of Raymond Moody. And you can watch his films, and he does they're pretty cool films. He does reenactments of the stories, and you know, they're dramatized, but they're pretty cool to watch. They're coming from the actual stories, which all have so much in common. I'll just tell one of the stories I saw on his thing is there was a fatal car accident, and they were they picked up the body in a helicopter. This was in a mountain pass, and cars were just backed up because there was no way around it, and they brought in a medevac to take someone who did survive but was in critical condition and put the body of the dead person on it, because they were hundreds of miles from any real civilization, so they put that body also on the helicopter. That body was also able to, the dead body, well, let's just get to this part of the story. The dead body turned out to came back to life. They didn't even try with that body, but it came back to life. And then called a woman who was in the traffic jam and thanked her for praying for him because she tipped the scales for him. And she says, how did you even get to me? And he says, I saw your license plate while my helicopter was taking off. I mean, he was dead. and on a stretcher covered over, and was able to go out her body and see, felt the prayers being said, checked out the license plate of the lady, and kept the license plate in mind to track her down with the Department of Motor Vehicles and call her and thank her for her prayers. There's a lot of cool stories. That's an extreme story, but there's a lot of cool stories like that. Just one other funny one was this guy was going on a fishing trip, and his sister-in-law was dying, and she basically died. He didn't know she'd died yet, but they said there was like almost no chance for her. And so he's on the phone in the waiting room telling his fishing buddies, he says, it doesn't look like I'm coming. It looks like the old lady kicked the bucket. And so it turned out they did bring her back to life with the PJCs, the people jumper cables, and she was brought back to life. And he comes to her bedside afterwards. We're so happy you're alive. Oh, it was torturous, And she's like, old lady's gonna kick the bucket? He's like, what do you mean? Oh, why do you have to speak about that? Speak about me like that. Old lady, he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. She's like, you told your friends in the waiting room, looks like the old lady's gonna kick the bucket. And then he turned white. He's just like, whoa. Anyway, a lot of stories of this remote viewing. It's called remote viewing in outer body work. But for sure, everyone who has the near-death experience has remote viewing. And just on this subject, since we're on remote viewing a little bit, is to be sensitive around dead people. Be sensitive around people. I know we're used to being sensitive around live people, but you got to be sensitive around dead people too. When you got a dead person hanging around. So be sensitive. One thing is tzitzis. Tuck the tzitzis in your pants when you're around a dead body, which might be a funeral, or maybe you're taking care of business because you're dealing with a dead person. If it's not a Jew, you don't have to worry about your tzitzis, but if it's a Jew, their soul now would do anything to do even one mitzvah. And even if it's a woman, you still tuck your tzitzis away because the soul has no gender. Only bodies have genders. So even a female soul would do anything to be able to do the mitzvah of tzitzis for even a split second. We don't understand what we've got going for us here in this world. Like every second you do a mitzvah, any kind of mitzvah chesed kind, to do tzedakah, to wear tzitzis tefillin. When you pass away and you're still not, like your soul's still kind of doing the hovercraft, yeah, you do anything just to get back in that body and just do one quick mitzvah, even say Shema, anything. So be sensitive around it. It says like wearing tzitzis around a dead person's like rubbing it in their face. Rubbing the fact that they can't do any more mitzvahs in their face. I remember once I found I had a very spiritual kid, my first kid, and he was, all my kids are pretty spiritual, but this kid was jumping on his bed, yelling. Every time he jumped up, he yelled, take me, take me, take me. He was like 4 years old. I'm like, what's going on here? I go in there, I said, what are you doing? He says, I want Hashem to take me. And because he was raised by me, and all the bedtime stories are always talking about how much better the soul world is, and down here, it's like, very spiritual bedtime stories, and so he just figured like, let's get out of this place already, so I said to him, you don't want him to take you, and he says, why not? And I said, because you haven't done any mitzvahs. He says, I do lots of mitzvahs. I said, you're not bar mitzvah yet, so you're not obligated to any mitzvahs, which means you go up to God now, you come up empty-handed. You have nothing to show for your life. You come up after bar mitzvah, you got all your mitzvahs in your pocket. So he says, don't take me, don't take me. He was scared because he's yelling, take me. So he's telling God, don't take me. Okay, back to our proof of the soul.
Actually, the same thing is true with coma patients.
With what?
Coma patients.
Oh, to be careful around them, sure. Oh, yes.
That's true.
You hear everything.
Sense to go is hearing.
Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, hearing's done a lot more than the ears. Hearing is experienced by you, not by your ears. And so they can experience.
But what about like souls that enter other bodies? Like there was recently.
Oh, here we go. This is Soul Week. We're doing Soul Week.
There was recently a kid that claimed he was he died in a World War II plane crash, and he called out all the people that were with him that were still alive and his crew, and he showed where the plane crashed and everything.
How old was the kid?
It was like 6 years old.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, you get stories like that, especially with such a big population today. You get
Where
more and
little
more.
kid came back and accused his killer of the murder, showed where the dead body was, and the guy like freaked out and had like a heart attack in front of him.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's cool too. Okay. Oh, and just another thing is burials should be quick and same-day burials ideally. Jerusalem's same-day burials. Otherwise, as quick as possible. And you do not wait for the body to. You don't wait for everyone to come to town, so it's some like great party at the funeral. It's better to honor the dead more than the living. So if someone has passed away, just get right to the burial. Okay, even if you have to miss it. In Jerusalem, families miss burials all the time. Kids miss parents' burials. Parents miss kids' burials. Parents are out overseas. You know, dad's on business. Because every burial here is the same. It's a same-day burial. And so parents miss burials. You know, it's really same day because we really honor the deceased to get the job done now. Let the soul finally move on, because the soul doesn't really move on totally until after burial. And caskets are not good either. Caskets are a no-no because they also kind of, is he buried or is he not buried? You know, like he's kind of half buried, but he's still in this box. And so caskets for most people, caskets aren't a big deal, but for some people, caskets can be even further suffering of the death experience of separating from the body. You want to separate as quickly as possible. And so ideally, there shouldn't be a casket. In other words, our funerals are out of the box. So, sorry about that. Funerals are. There's no problem with sanitation with burying bodies. If anything, I would think the opposite, because here the body decomposes into the earth nicely, whereas the casket, it's going to just kind of rot in there.
And then ruin the water supply, heavy metals.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff's involved in the casket. In the casket, but also the body just is going real slow, and it's going back to the earth, which means it has much more time to get yucky. Whereas in the cool earth, it'll just kind of re-earth, becomes earth. And so, yeah, that's why it's good to go to a funeral in Israel, to get at least one funeral under your belt, to go experience a funeral where you actually see the body. You know, you don't see it, it's wrapped, but it's an amazing experience because it's just real. And you can go put your hand on the stretcher and carry it. You know, you just stick your hand in there and feel the weight a little bit, and like you got like the arm touching your arm while you're carrying it to the ground, and they're literally putting in a body into the ground. So like one guy jumps in the grave, and they kind of lower him. You know, one side lifts up and it slides, and he grabs carefully. He's very gentle, carries it, puts that part under, puts the legs under, turn that thing off. Cool ringer though. Anyway, enough about burial. The next thing is science. In brain science, they have checked out the whole brain, and they have not found, they can't find you in your brain. You don't exist in your brain. They've found the sense of touch, they found the sound, the sense of feeling, of smell, of sight, hearing. They've also found all the emotions. They found fear, they found desire, they found anxiety. Every kind of emotion you can have is found in the brain. They've mapped the entire brain, and they've done this a long time ago. They basically mapped our whole brain. The one thing they cannot find in your brain is you. They can't find you. Meaning they can't find the actual point of reference of the being that experiences fear, or experiences anxiety, or experiences love, or experiences touch. They can't find the actual person who is experiencing all these things. So they see the experience, but they can't find an actual place, and there is none. They gave up on that. They have given up in brain science of ever finding the actual person that experiences all the stuff that the brain's patterning. But if you go further into brain science, you discover that inside the brain itself is where you're experiencing life, so to speak, meaning where all that stuff's being mapped, is all going on in the cerebral cortex for the most part. And the cerebral cortex is made of neurons, and you have billions of neurons, billions of them. And neurons either fire or don't fire. Fire or don't fire, and that's what neurons do. So you're not a neuron. You're just not a neuron. It's a neuron's like a squiggly thing, and like when it's firing, it kind of goes like that. When it's not, it's like that. To see a neuron, you'd have to multiply it like 10,000 times to even have a neuron be visible. But imagine I borrowed one of your neurons. Yeah? Can I borrow a neuron? What's your name again?
Yitzi.
Borrow Yitzi's neuron. Thank you very much. You haven't smoked too much weed, have you, Yitzi? Great. So you got plenty of neurons. Anyway, I borrowed a little neuron of Yitzi. Now I multiply it 10,000 times, put it on an overhead projector. Okay? Is that going to be a picture of Yitzi? Is that going to be Yitzi going, hey guys, it's me, Yitzi? No. So he's not that neuron. But what if I put 3 neurons together? Is that Yitzi? 50? 100 neurons together? Now is that Yitzi? Are we going to get a picture of Yitzi up there, or we got just a picture of 50 neurons firing or not firing? The answer is no matter how many you keep adding, it never, ever would amount to who Yitzi is. Because Yitzi's not a neuron. He's not one of them, that's for sure. But if he's not one of them, he's not all of them. So you absolutely and totally don't exist in your brain. Your brain is only collecting data, whether it's the senses of the data or it's experience. It's very connected. Neurons are very connected to the past. So like if you never experienced anything to be afraid of, you'd never be afraid. It's connected to like that dog that barked when you were a little kid. So now when a dog barks, and you'd be like, whoa. So that's all the neurons patterning from a dog barking when you were little. And everything's patterned based on the past, unless it's a reincarnation issue. Some people are afraid of things that there's no reason they should be. But when they go do a past life regression, they find that that's how they died often. Like people are claustrophobic, often drowned in previous lives. And people were afraid of heights, maybe fell to their death, or whatever. Some people they see guns and they like freak out for no reason, or there's a woman in Jerusalem, if she sees striped clothing like the Holocaust clothing, and we're talking pinstripe suits at events, she goes into like a crazy convulsive state because she obviously was at the Holocaust, and whenever she sees stripe, that kind of vertical stripe makes her go crazy. Yeah.
If you have a Jewish soul, are you always reincarnated in a Jew?
Not necessarily. Yeah, Jewish soul doesn't always come back as a Jew. It can come back from a Gentile mommy, and then it will. And Judaism's through the mother's side, so he can come back in a Gentile mommy, and he'll have to work that out. He'll have some weird penchant for chicken soup or something, or he'll always be like lighting fires and stuff during Hanukkah. He'll burn this Christmas tree by accident. I just feel like I got to light something on fire. So, and then their test is to work their way back.
Because there's people who they feel Jewish.
Now they have a Jewish soul, they just don't have a Jewish mom. Which sounds impossible.
Confusing.
Yeah, no, one second, I'll explain. Their soul's from the Jewish line. Oh, they still have a Jewish soul. I'm sorry. You can't be born with a Gentile soul. But you could be born with a Gentile mom, and you're going to have to come and convert.
Oh, okay, so then you'll convert during that life.
Yeah.
Okay. Or you'll just feel like you need to convert or something. So then that soul is still on Mount Sinai.
Yeah, and that soul may not have come down since Mount Sinai. That soul was at Mount Sinai and never entered a body until now, and was raised as a Gentile, but was really a Jewish soul. Yes, I'm coming to you in a sec, but I think she had something on the heels of conversion. So let him ask first because he had his hand up. Yeah.
So can Mashiach be not non-Jewish?
The Mashiach can't be non-Jewish, but the Mashiach could definitely have some crazy lineage and have found his way to Judaism, or found his way, maybe he's born Jewish and found his way to observance. But Mashiach can definitely, probably not a convert, because he has to be from the house of Judah, and that would require the father, but maybe it would go, the father's, but no, that wouldn't go. No, he has to be born Jewish. He has to have a Jewish mother, and a father has to be from the tribe of Judah. So that's the breaks on that one. I wouldn't say this lady was next, yeah.
So are there any new souls coming down now, or it's...
So our Kabbalistic tradition is that there may be by Gentile souls, but by the Jewish souls of Sinai, which are, there are only 600,000 root souls, and we are all branches of those root souls. So for the 600,000 root souls, there are no new souls since the destruction of the first temple. So all the souls that came after Sinai till first temple were either recycled, meaning reincarnated, or there were some new ones popping out from those original sparks of Sinai. After the first temple was destroyed, that was the end of new souls. So if someone feels like a new soul, like they just feel like they're out of their depth here and like they're not good at really anything, and they can't seem to like put a cap on a bottle properly, and meaning they're just so new that people like that, they're new-ish, meaning they've probably been around once or twice. But, meaning they were in the soul world for 1,500 years, and then they like came down once, and then they were up there for another couple hundred years, and then came down twice, and maybe they went up for another 800 years, and then they came down now. And now they find themselves like not in their element often down here. Whereas souls who've been around a long time, and a lot of times, you hand them like you hand them an old like beat up, orange that you found in the back of your car, and they turn it into like a musical instrument. Their hands create, and there's music coming out. Like they themselves will create music, and they're just dexterous, and there's a different level of knowledge and wisdom within them as they are. They're rare individuals you meet who are these super old souls, but I've gotten to meet a few. Wow. It was amazing knowing these people. They're magnetic people. You just want to be around them, and they've got this kind of calming energy. I'll never forget one of these guys. He was just walking around the planet. That's all he did was walk around, unless, of course, there was like a great dead show or something. Then he would jump in a car. And he once jumped in my truck. I used to go to the dead shows, and he jumped in my truck, and we all went up to the Grateful Dead. And it was one of the best shows I ever saw of the Grateful Dead. It was a New Year's show in Oakland. And the next morning, we're all talking about the show, and I said that was by far the best Grateful Dead show. Best Grateful Dead show I've ever seen. And the guy next to me says, Glaser, you never went in the show. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, you were in the parking lot the entire time because I was with you the entire time. And I'm like, what? He says, yeah, it was live simulcast, meaning he was blasting out of every stereo in the whole entire parking lot. And we didn't stop dancing for about 8 hours. But you didn't go in. And I reach in my pocket, I pull out my ticket. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even go into the show. And he's like, never went to the show. And I'm like, oh man, that was the best show I ever saw. Just didn't actually go in. So, I remember at the end of one of the shows, so we're on a rooftop watching the sunrise, and we're staring at my truck. So his whole lesson to the world was give your stuff away. If you can't give your stuff away, it owns you. Whatever you can't give away owns you. It's a very deep lesson, but it's not very Jewish. It's not very Jewish, and he wasn't very Jewish either. He was a Gentile. But a super old soul. This guy was just, he had nothing, but he was always giving away gifts. Always giving away gifts, because anything he touched, he could just whittle it into the most beautiful thing and just hand it to you. And he could find the strangest things, and it would become a musical instrument within a half hour. And then he would play beautiful music on a never before played instrument. And anyways, I remember we're on this rooftop, and all these hippies are hanging out, and we're staring down at my truck, which has all my surfboards in it, and stereo system, and like my wetsuits, and it's like that's my life, And he's like, you got to give your truck away. I think your truck owns you. And then all these like Northern California hippies are like, yeah, give it away. And I'm like, you want me to give my truck away? He says, then you'll be free. And I'm like, but what do you mean I'll be free? Like, this is my freedom. My freedom is going surfing all around, the entire West Coast from Oregon down to Cabo San Lucas. Like, I need this truck for my freedom. He's like, your truck owns you. Give it away. Come on, give it away. And so the crowd was like, give it. And I'm staring at my truck just going like, no way am I giving that truck. So they finally like got to that climatic moment where like, and he's like, will you give the truck away? The microphone's on there. I'm like, not a chance in hell. And everyone's like, ah. And of course the subject changed immediately. Anyway, so that's the old soul type of thing. But yeah, Mashiach would have to be from the you asked your question, yeah? Did I answer it? Keturah, you had a question?
Yeah, so Gentiles do like say, oh, I just feel Jewish, so that's not them just wanting to be Jewish?
Sure, but they may feel Jewish. Feelings, anyone can feel anything. Feeling something doesn't mean much except for the person who's feeling it.
But so you're not equating that with somebody who, like we're talking about, comes back with a Gentile mother and has a Jewish soul?
Oh, it'd have to be more than just feels Jewish. They would feel all the things we feel when we don't have Torah, like, just that incomplete feeling, that kind of existential angst. It would be much more. It wouldn't be just, how many of us, raise your hand if you knew Gentiles growing up who just felt Jewish, like they could even say blessings and stuff, like they knew stuff. Yeah, you guys had friends like that? Any of you had friends like that? I had some friends like that. They felt like honorary Jews, but they were certainly not converting. When we're talking about people who are suffering the Jewish maladies, of existential angst. Jews can't live with themselves. If they don't have Torah, they can't live with themselves. I mean, they may distract themselves with all kinds of things, but it's only because they can't live with themselves, so they have to distract themselves. So if the Gentiles going through all the stuff that Jews go through, then it could be they're really of a Jewish soul. You'll also find that they reject Christianity like in 2 seconds. Whereas you'll meet some Gentiles who will be like still kind of holding on to it. Yeah.
Is it possible for souls to reach Nirvana or like rest for the soul after life, or no, because all the souls are pretty much reincarnated at this point?
So the whole Nirvana concept, which is an Eastern concept of afterlife, which is to become one with the Godhead, to become one with spirituality, is not a Jewish concept at all. You no longer existing and being in total oneness with God to the point of you not even existing at all would be considered a punishment. Meaning that's where like the evil people go, so to speak. Meaning they were doomed to non-existence. You see, for you to experience pleasure in this world, let's say, you have to be you, right? What's your name? Ayelet. Don't I know you, Ayelet?
Yeah.
How you been?
Good, thanks.
Nice to see you again. Ayelet, for you to experience pleasure, there has to be Ayelet. No Ayelet, no pleasure. Okay? It's a weird thing, but you somehow have to be Ayelet to experience pleasure. So you can go buy a ice cream shake. What's your favorite flavor?
Mint.
What?
Mint.
Whoa, mint. I love asking people this question. It's just, you get the funniest things. Lately I've been eating pistachio. I never thought I'd eat pistachio. So I just bored of ice cream, I guess. Anyway, so there has to be Ayelet drinking the mint with all the history of your life and why mint, and was a well-made milkshake, and it's smooth texture, and there's no clumps, and it's Ayelet experiencing all this. So, two, when you pass away and your soul goes into the soul world, when your soul goes into the soul world, it has to be Ayelet going into the soul world and experiencing that. Now, it's not the same. You wouldn't have selfish feelings. Like now, you have to watch out for yourself. You make sure you wear a sweater, you're not cold. You got selfish interests, which you need to have. There, you would have zero selfish interests, but you don't have a body anyway, so Who cares if you have selfish interest? There's no, how do you have selfish interest without a body? But you still have you. Whereas becoming totally consumed in the light of Hashem would be doomed to non-existence. And so what was the point of all your mitzvahs if your whole life amounted to zero because you became one with God and there was no more you? So then you really didn't, then your life was meaningless. So in a way it would create meaninglessness for life. Now, again, it's a very nihilistic thing. Eastern traditions is to nullify self as much as possible to the point where high levels of it would be celibacy, meaning you're not going to create a next generation, where you've renounced all possessions and you are supported by the monastery. Meaning the highest levels is to be really to not exist. And that's the word enlightenment, or the word Buddha, which means enlightenment in English, is to become one with all. So to become one with that river. So there is no you, and there is no river, there's just all. And you're becoming one with that, with the entire physical and metaphysical universe around you. That's the goal, and therefore the more you became like the river, the more you became like the foot that just stepped on your toe. You know, you stepped on our toe. The more you become one with it all, so then when you pass away, you just become one with, and you no longer exist at all. But you spent your whole life trying not to exist. That's the goal in the Eastern traditions on the highest levels, is to become non-existent, to have no more selfish experience, no more attachment to self. It's to disattach. Detach. Whereas in Judaism, your soul has been traveling through the years, through the centuries, through the millennia. It comes in, it goes out. It comes in, it goes out. When it comes in, it has a chance to do mitzvahs. All the things you do wrong while you're alive will have no consequence. Meaning you'll pay for it, but it's a very short period of time vis-a-vis the soul world. The maximum amount of time someone could pay for their bad moves. When I say pay for it, you have to understand what I mean by that. What I mean by that is you have to sleep. You sleep in the bed you make. So if you were selfish, or you used people, or you had a big carbon footprint on the planet, which spiritually could mean even not making blessings on foods and stuff, is just like, which is, for Judaism, that's tantamount to stealing. To not make a blessing on a food is like as if it was coming to you. There's a sense of entitlement. When we don't make a blessing on a food, we're basically walking with entitlement. And it's very animalistic as well, because an animal, he sees the food, he eats it. And when next time you go by the restaurants in Restaurant Row, watch someone take their burger and just a tourist, they got their burger, they're entitled to it, they paid for it. And they just eat it. There's no pause to reflect on our humanness, the fact that we are actually spiritual beings. Yes, I need this burger to nourish myself. I'm going to need the protein. But let me pause for a moment and reflect on being a human being, and even give thanks. And you can give thanks in your own words. You can even do it silently. I'm not saying halakhically. Halakhically, it should leave your mouth. But I'm just saying, if you're not ready to make brachas, but just spend a moment being human for a sec. Don't just put your head right in the trough. The trough. Just pause for a second. And by the way, very observant Jews are guilty, because they say the blessing, but they often inhale the blessing. It's like the blessing's in the way of the food. And we got to get the blessing out of the way of the food. And you can make a blessing so fast if you're whispering. And have you ever seen how fast someone can make a blessing? They'll make blessings, I don't want to mimic a blessing like that, but it would be, it'd be something like, I don't even want to do it. I'm not going to do it. I don't do it. And I certainly suggest you don't. Give it a pause. Give it a pause. The fastest blessing I make are when I'm dying for a sip of water, and I don't want to interrupt this guy talking, who's needs to say something, and he's starting to cry, and he's this emotional, and I'm in a counseling session, I've been hired. So then I'll make a faster bracha, but I kind of make it slow and kind of put my hand here, and listening. Drink my drink. Hope he doesn't notice so much. Yeah. Yes?
How is it possible, you said there's 600,000 souls, right? How is it possible that there's 14 million Jews and 600,000 souls?
You got a lot of drinking buddies out there, don't you? So the answer is, we drew this yesterday. Were you here yesterday?
No.
Oh, yeah, this is a famous question. I'll draw it again.
I've seen this before.
What?
I've seen this before when you did this.
Really?
Yeah, with the soul world.
So here's 6 of your drinking buddies right here.
Oh, this I didn't.
You know what this is? I did it yesterday. Those are 6 of your drinking buddies. Those are all part of you, because this is the root soul of the 600,000. And here are 6 people that are coming off that root soul. So you have, and they're all your soulmates. One of them could be your grandfather. One of them could be, it could be your daughter. Later. You may give birth to one of your soul people from your root soul. You could have a friend, a best friend who you don't even have to say it. They know what you're thinking. They're just like, not everyone's so lucky to meet someone like that, but you can meet someone who just can finish your sentences for you. They're just like, they're soulmates.
But not
And
soulmate, like husband, wife.
yeah, we look at, I know we use the word soulmate as the person you marry, but in this case, we're using it much more loosely as the same, they're a mate, I see the word mate, maybe is the problem here. They're, what do you want to call them?
Soul pals.
Soul pals.
Soul buddy.
Soul buddies. Soul buddies. So I've met a few people whose root souls I share. I definitely share my wife's root soul. I scored on that. That was, you don't always exactly nail that, and thank God I nailed that, which is weird. And we look alike, and it's like bizarre. They say if you look just like your spouse, your siblings from a previous life. Yeah. And yes, sir.
Do each of the soul paths have their own soul still, even though it's from a root soul?
Yeah, of course,
But
sure.
you're from like the same soul family or something.
Yeah, you're soul pals. Some of them are family members. I don't think I share any root souls with anyone in my family. I don't really share souls of any of those people. The closest would maybe be my mother. I'm not even sure about that either. It's very likely not to be a root soul with anyone in your family. Doesn't mean you're not part of each other's process, meaning you could have been traveling together and probably likely traveled together many times, because souls do have they generally come around with each other in different relationships, often shifting relationships. But I don't feel like any root soul connection to my family. My best friend in the entire world is in my family. So, but we're such different beings, and we have like everything in common, but nothing in common on the core level.
What do you mean by sharing a root soul? Like, it's not like the root soul and it's 2 different people, like, living at the same time.
Yeah, many different people. Here you got 6 people living. Now there's a bunch of others in here, yeah, that are right now, they're as of yet brought down to the world. So they're in the soul world. Much more are in the soul world than in the body world. So these are all souls of people who passed away, and they're back in the root soul. But right now, there's 6 people hanging around who all have your root soul. And ideally, you want to try to marry that person, which is pretty intense, because this is really brings us down to the deeper Kabbalistic level of marriage, and the crisis of intermarriage is that you could wind up with not with your root soul.
How do you know?
What?
So how do you know?
How do you know you're marrying your root soul?
Yeah.
It's not so easy to know. It's not so simple.
Is there a way?
Is there a way to know?
Yeah.
There are those who hold that you can go to Kabbalists and ask them.
No, I'm talking about on your level.
Yeah, and your level. Well, I don't actually go by that personally, but I know a lot of people, they will not date someone until they send names by the Kabbalist and the parents' names.
People don't hold you at all.
I don't hold to that at all.
Beyond that. I'm talking about
Yeah.
normal. How do you know?
So there's a couple things you can do. One is that if she still has strong intuition, so her intuition should be buzzing away, and the guy, if it's the right one, would probably feel acute fear. So, what?
What do you mean keep?
Meaning he'll be feeling like suddenly this apprehension. He'll feel afraid, like that's scaring him, that this is it. She'll feel like, wow, this is it. And he's like, oh no, this is it. Anyway, so that's one example. I mean, we could go deeper into it, but acute fear for the man and a great intuition that it's right for the woman. Yeah. Okay, last question while I erase the board. Yeah.
You know how, like, it was like a two-part question, but like, you know when you meet someone and you thought like you've known them before, but you never met them before at all, and like you have that weird feeling, like.
Yeah, that may be a soul pal. That's usually a soul pal. But what I didn't show you on the system is this whole bubble is connected to other ones. So they're all connected in unique ways. So that soul pal may be a soul pal directly to root soul, or it might be a secondary level or a primary level.
What about deja vu?
Not right now. Not right now. We can talk more about that tomorrow. Okay, shalom everybody.